Nepal. I probably didn't daven at a Sephardi shul.
Okay, so I believe we're back. Let me see if I can get the screen to show the right. I apologize for the delay. Just trying to get the screen back to where we need to be, and my computer is not reacting as quickly as I would prefer. My computer's going slow. I hope we don't get cut off from the internet. Oh, works. Oh, gewaltig. No, I'm fine. Thank you so much. So we're up to the Mishnah again. So we know that the halacha is we're chazering what we did today. Yeah, yeah. Because there's an other. No. Because I normally say a shir tonight. The only time tomorrow I'm going to be learning twice daf your test, which is tomorrow's daf, which will be at 7 a.m. and at 8:45, and then tomorrow night, which is exclusively the Neil shir. Tomorrow night at 8:30, I'll start learning where Daniel's up to. If you could remember, if anyone can remember where Daniel was up to, I'd appreciate it. We haven't learned that in a while, so I'll be able to. We'll start something. I don't need to know now, as long as I know tomorrow night where we were up to, where you got up to. You know now. You know Aleph. Okay, so then that's where we'll start. So Mitchum tomorrow we'll learn that. I'm sorry for schlepping you out here for nothing. So we'll start Mitchum tomorrow night at 8:30. We'll learn the Aleph on base. Okay, gewaltig. So we learned that on Yom Tov everything is assumed to be Torah. It's not magic. It's because everybody is expected to be matar themselves before Yom Tov. They have to go to the mikveh. They have to be matar all of their kalim. So Zok to Gemara, since we know that everybody has to be matar themselves before Yom Tov, so they have to go to the mikveh. So Chol Yos Achar Shabbos, if Yom Tov falls out on Sunday, Beishamei Oimrim Matbilan Es HaKoil Milufnei HaShabbos. You're not allowed to toivel your kalim and toivel yourself on Shabbos. All of the tefillas have to be on a Friday, on Erev Shabbos. Beis Hillel says, kalim milufnei HaShabbos. Kalim have to be toivel before Shabbos. But for Adam, b'Shabbos. But people, they can toivel on Shabbos. B'Shavin, they both agree, Shemashikin Es HaMayim B'chli Even L'Tayor. I don't mind after this going back, but that'll be 10:30. I don't know if that might be too late. Okay, so v'shavin shemashikin as a kalim b'chli even l'tayr. What happens if you have water that's tamei? If it's in a stone keli, the stone keli remains tahar because stone is not makabel tamei, but the water can be tamei. And interesting enough, there is no possibility of ever being matar food that became tamei. If food became tamei, it's irrevocable and it's not fixable. However, water could be fixed. And the way you fix the water, you should make hashaka. Our mikvayis, we don't toivel in the actual rainwater bar. They fill up a bar with rainwater. Beside it, they fill up a bar with fresh, nice water. There's a hole in between the two bars that allow the two bodies of water to touch each other. And what that does is that makes the clean water into mikvah water as well, just by touching. Well, you could do that with drinking water. Imagine you have drinking water and it's tar and you need this water because there's not a lot of fresh water available. Your mikveh is filthy. It's full of protein, hair, dandruff, who knows what else is in there. And you don't want to drink it, but you need to toivel the water. You need to make hashaka. You need to touch this water. So what they would do is, they would take a keli, they would bring it a hair below water level. So there would be just one small layer of mikveh water on top of it, thereby touching the two waters. And then what you could do is, then you could use that fresh water and it doesn't even get mixed. So you're allowed to do that. Why are you allowed to do that? Because the keli is tar. You're not going to tar the keli. If it was in a wooden keli, where the keli would be tamei, you wouldn't be able to do that because in the process of dipping the keli into the mikveh, you're making the keli tar, and you're not allowed to make a keli tar. So if you had tamei water that was in a stone keli, then you could do it. Avo loimat bilin, but you're for sure not allowed to toivel keli. umatbilin migab legab umechabura lechabura. The Gemara will explain what these items are mentioned tomorrow. Zok the Gemara, the chula alma mias kli b'Shabbos loy. Everybody agrees that you're not allowed to toivel kalim on Shabbos. My time, what is the reason why you're not allowed to toivel kalim on Shabbos? You have a kalim that's tummy. Why can you not toivel it on Shabbos? The Gemara is going to offer, I believe, 3 or even 4 different reasons as to why. And the first person is Rabbah. Amar Rabbah, the reason why you're not allowed to toivel kalim on Shabbos or Yom Tov is Gzeira Shema Yitalenu B'Yadoi V'Yavirenu Arba Amos B'Shus Rabbah. We're afraid that you're going to be looking for a mikveh. You're going to carry your keli that's tamei through Rosh Hashanah, 4 Amos, and then you're going to be over Rachman L'Tzon on Isur Daraisa if it's Shabbos. So Omer Le Abaye, Frek Le Abaye, what if I have a mikveh in my house? Yesh Le Bar B'Chatzeiroi Ma'ikal Meima. If I have a bar in my own chatzar, well then I should be able to toivel kelim on Shabbos, because there is no risk, there is no chance that I might carry it outside, because I'm here, my mikveh is here in my own property. Amrlei, Gzeira bar b'chatzeiroi atu bar b'shus harabim. The Gzeira is, we don't even let you use a bar in your own property, because if we do, then someone might also want to toivel something that's not in his own property, and that will. This is today's daf. We did that this afternoon. That's correct. It's a repeat of this afternoon. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to learn tomorrow's daf at 7 a.m. and at 8:45 a.m. Whoever wants, that'll be down in the Oitzer. And tomorrow night at 8:30, we can learn whatever your oilam wants. Because tomorrow, not at 8:30, is exclusively for your oilam, and we could learn either what you're holding or hear whatever is better for you. And I'm asking to start even before 8:30 so we can do some catch up. But I don't mind looking from 8 to 9:40. Okay, so then 8:30 is the earliest. Okay, so we'll learn from 8:30 to 9:45, and then we'll go back to Yud Aleph, and I'll try to catch you up as much as possible. I have a whole oilam over here from Rabbi Finkelshire, who's very disappointed because they normally learn Motzei Shabbos, and they already learned this with me this afternoon. So they thought we were going to be learning from where Rabbi Finkel was up to. So I apologize for that. So Amar Lei, Gzeira bar b'chatzeir atu bar b'shus harabim. The reason why you're not allowed to toivel kelim, even if you have a mikveh in your house, is because we're afraid that people are going to toivel kelim. It'll come that they'll also toivel them elsewhere, and then chas v'sholom, someone might carry a keli in Rosh Hashanah 4 Amos, which is a deraisa Rachman L'Tzon. Shabbos. So that explains why you're not allowed to toivel kelim on Shabbos. But b'Yom Tov ma'ikal meimer. On Yom Tov you're allowed to carry. So why should we prohibit somebody from toiveling kelim on Yom Tov? There is no danger, there's no catastrophe that can come out of it, because even if you carry it into Rosh Hashanah, that is perfectly allowed. So tomorrow goes with Yom Tov to Shabbos. There's a gzeira, if we allow Yom Tov, you'll allow Shabbos. And Tosfos asks, I will have a gzeira. Why isn't it a gzeira? So tomorrow the Yom Tov b'Shabbos achasi. Chazal perceive that Yom Tov and Shabbos is one thing. By answering Yom Tov, by answering Shabbos, automatically they answer Yom Tov as well. Fact Gemara, umikas rinan. Do you make such gzeras? Do we expand these gzeras and cast such a wide net to answer so many things when the problem is only on Shabbos that you might carry something with Rosh Hashanah? But now we learned in our very Mishnah, the Shavin Shemashikin Esamayim Bechli Evan L'Tayron. Everybody agrees you are allowed to take a stone keli and dip it into a mikveh water to be matar the water that you have in that keli. Avolay matbilin. But if it was a wooden keli, which the keli itself is tummy, you wouldn't be able to do that same act. Why? Because you're being misakin, you're making that keli tar. V'misa, and if you hold that you're supposed to expand gezeres, nigzer hakshaka atuat bala. The same way you're not allowed to toivel this water if it was in a tummy keli.
How does that work? The hakshaka in a keli.
You take a stone keli that's full of fresh water, you submerge it in a mikveh, but you don't go deep. You just go until there's maybe a hair of water above it. So this way, you won't mix the dirty mikveh water with your fresh, clean water, but they will come into contact with each other, and that makes the water that you have, the clear drinking water, it makes it tahor.
Yeah, okay. The normal other way of hashoka is like in the mikveh with a hole between the bird.
On the side.
Yeah, so that's an easier way.
But I don't know how practical that is with a cup of water, how would you have a hole in the side? If you had a hole in the side, it would run out. So that's why I explained it this way. Because how would you practically do that? If there was a hole in the side of the cup, the water would run right out.
I was trying to figure out either by having them level both of them against each other, or by drilling a hole in the keli.
Yeah. Or maybe you could drill a hole in the keli, plug it with your thumb, bring it below the water line, and then lift it up, and then until you come out.
Because by water, there's no such thing as tvila. If you toivel water, yeah, I know shashok is okay, but tvila is impossible by water. Right. As soon as you do that, it's mixed with the rest of it.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So, effectively, if it's hizbra, so the Gemara's kash is if you hold of expanding zera, so hashaka should also be also because you instead of using a stone keli, you might use a wooden keli. So how come you don't expand that zera? In fact, the Gemara, if it's hizbra, is that so? Are you suggesting that you should make such a zera? Let's think about it. If you have other drinking water, so then why go through this? Save this for tomorrow. Why would you even need to make a shaka? Elo the Leslie, it must be you don't have any water, and this was the only water you had. If this is the only water you have, the chivin the Leslie miser zarbahu. If this was the only water you have, the likelihood of it becoming tamei is very low because you would be watching it and protecting it like a hawk. And therefore, Zakrashi, I'm going to go to the last of the four top lines. Miser zarbahu shaloy yitamu. You'll be very careful that they shouldn't become tamei. The chivin the zarbahu, and since someone's very careful that they shouldn't become tamei. Which means now it's very unlikely that your last bit of water you would allow to become tamei. Once it's very, very not common for this to occur, like Rabbanan don't make a gzeira for something that's so unlikely. And therefore, that's not a kasha. But I say the Gemara is attacking Rabba again and again. You're telling me, Rabba, that you're answering even on Yom Tov because of Shabbos. Even if I have a mikve they answer, you're expanding the gzeira. I say. Madlin bidli tamei. Vutar. What if I own a well, like Bechaim Chilebuch's house, he has a well, there's a nice wooden basket that's connected to a pulley that you lower down into the well to draw water. What if that basket, that pail, was tamei? Or you want to draw water. So the halacha is you're allowed to draw water. Now, when you submerge the pail in the mikveh, in the well, it's going to become tar. You're allowed to do that. Because you're trying to just draw water. Sure, it happens simultaneously that the keli is becoming tar, but you're allowed to do that. If you hold, you have to expand the gzeira. How could we allow you to draw water with a keli that's tummy that will become tar? You should be geyser that I might toivel a keli. Since we only allow you to draw water when it's connected to a well, when it's drawing water, zacharu, you won't make that mistake because you can never toivel anything unless you're actually drawing water. And Tosfos makes it a little bit more clear. So we're going to slide over into Tosfos at this same height. Madlin b'dli tamei v'utar me'elov. It becomes Torah because it's been submerged in the water. Tamer frek Tosfos. The b'masnishin in our very Mishnah, Amar ein matbilin kli al gabe meimav l'tayrai. You're only allowed to use a stone keli. You're not allowed to dip a wooden keli into the mikveh, even if you just want to be matar the water. So why is this any different than when I'm drawing water? Why is that allowed if this is not allowed? There you have a cup, a bowl, a keli full of fresh water, and you're dipping it into a mikveh. You're surely not drawing water. You don't lower a full pail when you're drawing water. You lower an empty pail when you're drawing water. So it'll be clear to anybody watching that you're trying to toivel it. And you're not allowed to toivel a kli. The Mexican misakin. It looks like you're being misakin. When you're talking about lowering an empty bucket into a well to draw water, nobody realizes that dli is tamei. They just think you're trying to draw water from a well. Anyone watching will assume that he's just trying to draw water. No one would even fathom that he's trying to be matar anything. That's why this is allowed, while in the case of our Mishnah, where it's a full cup that you want to dip into a mikveh, that is not allowed. Beautiful. Zok the heilige Gemara weiter. Zok the heilige Gemara weiter.
So if the mikveh was a dirty mikveh,
which we're
and
assuming
everybody
it is.
knows that you're not using this water to drink, then you wouldn't be able to put in a keli into it.
I'm not sure what you're talking about. The stone keli. If you have a stone keli that's not tummy and you're just trying to be kosher the water.
No, you have a wooden keli.
But the Mishnah says you're not allowed to. The Mishnah Taka says you're never allowed to dip a wooden keli into a mikveh if it's full of water.
But if you want to draw water,
well, you're not going to lower a full keli of water if you're looking to draw water. The mere fact that the keli is full of water proves to anybody watching that you're not trying to draw water because
but
you
if
already
it's
have
not but if it's not a full keli,
if it's not a full keli and you're trying to draw water, you're allowed to.
Who draws water from a mikveh?
No, in a mikveh you wouldn't be able to. If it's a dirty mikveh, you wouldn't be able to because once again, it would be obvious that you're trying to toivel the keli. But if you're drawing fresh water, it's a freshwater mikveh like a well, then you'd be allowed to because people will assume you're just drawing water. So if it's delya mechichalav, if you're drawing water from a well, then you're allowed to. But if it's obvious that this is clearly to be tired because it's a dirty mikveh, surely you're not allowed to do it. Okay, so let's see the Gemara about you. Eisvei, kli shenitma me'erev yom. What happens if a keli became tamei on erev yom? Ein matbilin oisai b'yom. You can't tovel it on yom tov. And Rashi says the reason is because if you slide right over to Rashi, right beside this Gemara, you don't have to go up or down. Hoyel v'hoyeloi latbilin b'voyjoy. He had an opportunity that he could have toveled it while it was still day before yom tov came, and you didn't. You left it for yom tov. Therefore, you're not allowed to tovel it on yom tov. How about the yom tov? What if your keli only became tamei on yom tov, so you didn't have the option of toveling it before yom tov? Then matbil noisay b'yom tov. Then in fact you are allowed to tovel that keli on yom tov. Now let's just think for a moment. If you're toveling it for truma, you want to use this keli with truma, then the halacha is the Torah tells you that in order after you tovel a keli, you still can't use it for truma until you have something called harif shemesh, until sundown. So if you're toveling it for truma, you shouldn't really be allowed to because you can't use it today anyway. But Rashi says you can use it for chulin, because for chulin the Torah doesn't say you have to wait till the night. Once you tovel the keli, it becomes tahor right away. But you're not allowed to use it for truma till after nightfall. So you wouldn't be able to tovel it on Yom Tov to be able to use it Motzi Yom Tov. But since you can use it on Yom Tov for chulin, you're allowed to tovel. Correct the Gemara. If the Rashi just told us that if the keli became tamei on Yom Tov, you could tovel it. If it became tamei before Yom Tov, you can't tovel it. Well, why didn't you expand the gzeira? Then Isa nigzer the Yom Tov to the erev Yom Tov. Let's say you're not allowed to tovel any kelim on Yom Tov. You know why? Because if we allow you to tovel kelim on Yom Tov, you're also going to tovel kelim that became tamei before Yom Tov. So that's not allowed. Dr. Gemara, once again, it's not a kasha. Because Tumah b'Yom Tov milsat l'shchicha. It's very unlikely that there'll be any Tumah on Yom Tov. As we know, we make everybody prepare for Yom Tov by being Torah, even though we're ratzin. And people are highly sensitive to avoid Tumah no matter what on Yom Tov. So since it's so highly unlikely, like Rashi says, the loy shchicha, everybody is making themselves Torah. If they retire themselves from their tamei, they're surely going to be uber careful not to let themselves become tamei in the first place. So therefore, it's milsat l'shchicha. It's highly unlikely that would occur. Once again, the chances of someone becoming tamei on Yom Tov or a keli becoming tamei on Yom Tov are so low, their rabbanan aren't going to aser toveling such a keli. It's such an unlikely situation. So we're still sticking with Rabba's reason. The reason why you cannot tovel a keli on Shabbos or Yom Tov because you might carry it, and he expands the gzeira, and all of these exceptions to why the gzeiras aren't expanding into these places. So far, the Gemara has the svara of milsa the loy shchich. So now I want to take a step back for a second. We just made rules. If it became tamei erev Yom Tov, you may not tovel it on Yom Tov. If it became tamei on Yom Tov, you may tovel it on Yom Tov. What type of tumah are we talking about? There's a Tumah D'Oraisa and there's a Tumah D'Rabbanan. What is a Tumah D'Oraisa? The lowest level of Tumah that a Keli can attain is a Rishon Tumah. So if it touches a Sheretz is an Avatumah. If a Sheretz touches a Keli, it becomes a Rishon Tumah. But if this Keli that's a Rishon Tumah touches another Keli, it will not make the Keli Sheni Tumah. Because Midaraisa, there is no such thing as a Sheni Tumah. However, Midarabanan, for Truma, there is such a thing as Sheni Tumah. And we say that if Truma touches a Sheni Tumah, the Truma becomes possible. So the Tumah here that we're talking about toiveling the Keli for, what type of Tumah is it? So Zok to Gemara, Eisvei, Kli Shenitma Ba'avatuma. If a Keli became Tumah with an Avatuma, meaning it's a Richon, meaning it's Tumah Midaraisa, it's a real bona fide Tumah, Kli Shenitma Ba'avatuma, Ein Matbil Oisa B'Yom. You would not be able to toivel it on Yom Tov. Why? Rashi says, right out the side here, Ein Matbil Oisa B'Yom Tov, the Kivin the Tumah Minatayra, since it's really Tumah, this is for real Tumah, you're being Mesakin the Keli on Shabbos, on Yom Tov, one may not do that. But the Velada Tumah, if it only became Tameh with a Rishon, meaning it makes it into a Sheni, which Rashi says, the Midaraisa, Tarma Alyu. Midaraisa, this is not Tameh at all. There's no such thing as Sheni Tumah Midaraisa. So therefore, Matbil Nois B'Yom Tov, that we will allow you to Toivel on Yom Tov. So, Frank the Gemara, V'im Isa, if you have to expand Xeris, once again, Nigzer Ha, Atu Ha. The same way you cannot Toivel a Keli that's a Tameh Midaraisa, there's a Rishon Tumah, you can't toivel that on Yom Tov. So too, you shouldn't be able to toivel a Keli that's a Sheni on Yom Tov. Nigzer Ha to Ha. Zok to Gemara, no, not a reason. Why? Because Vlad Tumah Hechim Ishkachas Lo Gabe Koyanim. To who is ever relevant Sheni Tumah? Only people who Truma like a Koyan. Kohanim is reason name. Kohanim is reason. And since Kohanim is reason, we don't need to make that Gezer for them. And Rashi offers two reasons that I believe are both relevant. Why? The fact that Kohanim are reason, you don't need to make a Gezer for them. And Rashi says, A is Kohanim are Talmidei Chachamim. They know the rules well. And they know that there's a distinction between a Sheni L'Tumah, which is only Midirabanan, and a Rishon L'Tumah, which is Deraisa. So since they know that distinction clearly, the Chazal saw no reason to make a Gzera of Ha Atu Ha. They saw no reason to answer the Sheni L'Tumah because it might also cause a Rishon L'Tumah to be Tumah. That's reason number one. Inami is the reason Milavai Tumah L'Chlayim. The Kohanim would have made sure that their Kalim didn't become Tumah in the first place. So it's highly unlikely for a Kohen's Keli to ever become Tumah. And therefore, since it's such an unusual thing for the Kohen's Keli to become Tumah, they didn't make such a Gzeira. And therefore, you're allowed to toivel. You're allowed to toivel something that became Tumah with a Sheni L'Tumah, because that's not really Tumah, but you're not allowed to toivel a Rishon L'Tumah, that's a Tumah Midaraisa. So Tosfos asks a phenomenal question. Let's think about this. If this Keli became Tumah with a Sheni L'Tumah, are you allowed to use it for Chulin? Of course, because Chulin does not become Tumah if it touches a Sheni L'Tumah. So for Chulin, this Keli is good as it is. Elamai, why is the Kohen going to be toiveling this Keli? So that he can use it with Truma. But didn't we learn that when you toivel a Keli for Truma, it's not enough that you can use it right after you toiveled it. You have to wait till nightfall. So if you're toiveling a Keli on Yom Tov for Truma, then you're doing something, you're being mechen from Yom Tov L'chayil. Because today you can't use it for Truma anyway. You could only use it tonight. You're not allowed to toivel something today to use tonight. So Frekta is the Manashich. If you're using the Keli for Chulin, you can use it now already. Elamai, if you're toiveling it, you're only toiveling it for Truma. Well, then it can't be used until tonight. You're not allowed to toivel something today to use Motzi Yom Tov. So Frek Toshis, this makes no sense at all. So Toshis tells us a very big trick. I'm sorry?
Say it's a 2-day Yom Tov, or it's like Rosh Hashanah.
You're not allowed to prepare from one day to the next. You're not allowed to prepare from Yom Tov.
Rosh Hashanah is considered one day.
So we're not talking about Rosh Hashanah. We're talking about a regular Yom Tov. Okay. So Frek Toshis, how could that ever be allowed? So Toshis says a very big chiddush. He says Rashi says a chiddush. And Tosha says this proves Rashi's chiddush. Rashi says a chiddush. That by Truma, the halacha is when you toivel a Keli for Truma, you need Harab Shemesh. The Torah says you have to wait until tonight until you can use that Keli. That's only for Tumas D'Oraisas. For a Tama Derabanan, even for Truma, the moment you toivel the keli, you can use it. So therefore, the Kohen wants to toivel the keli today on Yom Tov because he's planning to use it today for Truma on Yom Tov. And therefore, he's allowed to do it. But the Chiddush is that even though normally for Truma, when you toivel a keli that's Tama, you can't use it until tonight. If it's a Tama Derabanan, when you toivel the keli, even for Truma, you can use it right away. Tashma, let's come and bring another right. So again, we keep on hammering away at Rabbah, who has this expanded Gzeira, and we keep on asking him, why over here doesn't the Gzeira expand? Why over there doesn't the Gzeira expand? And the Gemara keeps on offering the same teretz that it's a milsa l'shchicha. Tashma, Damar Bar Ashi Amarav, Nida she'ein begodim. A woman's a nida on Yom Tov, and she has to toivel. But the problem is she doesn't have any clothing that are tahar that she could change into. So the problem is she's trying to become tahar so she can use tahiris, she can touch things that are tahar, because on Yom Tov everybody has to become tahar, and she's stuck because even if she toivels, her clothing are still tamei, and you're not allowed to wash clothing on Yom Tov. So what should she do? Ma'aremes v'toivelas v'bigotel. She can actually go into the mikveh with her clothing, and as she becomes tahar, her clothing will become tahar as well. So let's learn a little bit more about this. So Rashi says, "Ma'aremes v'toivelas." We're about 6 lines down in the wider lines of Rashi. Rashi says, "Kishi lavusha." She can actually toivel with her clothes. The salkala tefila aflakalim, and not only will she become tahar, her clothing will become tahar as well. So right off the bat, you see from here that technically, if you're wearing loose-fitting clothing, they're not a chatzitza. So, for instance, if you go swimming in a bathing suit, for most people hold, you don't need to go to the mikveh after that. That's considered a perfect fila. It's not considered a chatzitza. That's just as an aside. But Zok Rashi here, even though normally you're not allowed to wash clothes, you're not allowed to toivel clothing, but here it doesn't look like she's taking, like she's being tired clothing. It doesn't look like she's toiveling them. Because she went into toivel herself. So we passing like Beis Hillel, that a person is allowed to toivel on Yom Tov and on Shabbos. Why? The Gemara is going to tell us shortly. The near Kameker. It doesn't look like you're being misaking yourself. People will think you were hot, so you went in for a dip. So therefore, there's no problem. But frank the Gemara, back into the Gemara. Vim Isa, if once again you hold like Rabbah, that you have to expand these gzeros, well, nigzar dilma aslet fulu beinayu. If we allow her to toivel wearing her begadim in order to be mitar her begadim, well then maybe even if she had a spare pair of begadim, she would actually just toivel the begadim directly, which is not allowed on Yom Tov. So tomorrow shiny hasam actually hutrila el aide malbish, since we only allow her to toivel these begadim by wearing them, which is so unusual, zechuri, she'll remember that there's no way, anyone looking will say there's no way I'd be allowed to toivel my begadim alone, because you see what a unusual situation I have to create in order to be able to be toivel my begadim. So that takes us to the end of Rabbah's opinion. The reason why you're not allowed to toivel kalim on Yom Tov, on Shabbos, is because we're afraid you're going to carry them. That's reason number one. Rabbi Yosef had another reason why you shouldn't be able to toivel kalim on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Gzeir mishum schita. We're afraid you're going to squeeze them out. We're afraid you're going to squeeze them out. Omer le Abaye, teinich kalim d'bnei schita. I understand if we're talking about clothing, you're going to squeeze them. But kalim d'lav d'bnei schita. But if you have a cup, you have a saucer, you have a plate, you have a fork, you have a spoon, you have a knife, you can't squeeze those out. Why can't I toivel those? Michael Amemar. Omer le, so he said, once again, we are expanding the Gezerah. Gezerah hani atohani. Since we don't want you to toivel clothing, therefore we don't let you toivel any kalim. Eisve kalani tiyofta. So all of these kashas that the Gemara asked that show that you don't expand the Gezerah, yet why over here are we saying you do expand the Gezerah to other kalim? And the Gemara answers the same answers that we had on Rabbah. So by reading this half a line, we just learned an extra Amud Gemara. So we just learned a full blot already, just by learning this line, because it repeats the whole Gemara again. There's a famous joke that people say over about two guys that would traveled on a train many years together, and they would sit, and one guy would say a number, you would call it a number like 24, and his friend would start laughing, and then another friend would say a different number, and you start laughing, and the newcomer on the train didn't know what was going on. they told him it's because we've been saying jokes to each other so many years, we just catalog the jokes. Instead of going through the trouble of saying the whole joke, we just catalog the joke. So I won't get into the punchline of that joke. That's safe for a different time. But here as well, the Gemara says instead of repeating all the kashas and terutzim again, we'll just draw your attention to the kashas and terutzim that we just discussed in Rabbah. Rabbi Amar, a third reason why you're not allowed to toivel your kelim on Shabbos and Yom Tov, Gzer Shema Yisha. If we allow you to toivel your kelim on Yom Tov, then you know what you're going to do? If you have kelim to toivel, most people are busy. I'm busy with other things. On Yom Tov, I can't work anyway. I'm not busy anyway. On Shabbos, I'm not busy anyway. I'll leave all my tevilah, I'll leave it to Shabbos and Yom Tov, because then it's convenient, because I'm not busy with other things. What's that going to lead to? That means you're going to have Tamei Kelim lying around in your house. It's very dangerous to have Tamei Kelim lying around in your house, because what if Truma touches it? Then it'll be Matama things. We don't want to be Matama things. So since we want people to make their homes tar as quickly as possible, we don't want to leave things lying around that are Tamei. Therefore, we don't allow people to toivel on Shabbos and Yom Tov. This way, they won't push them off to Shabbos and Yom Tov. And Tanya Kavasa de Rabbi. So I believe this is the third svara that we had so far. And the Gemara wants to bring a brisa which supports this svara for Bibi, because the brisa says, "Kali shenitnu me'erev Yom Tov, a keli that became tummy from on erev Yom Tov, and mapil nois of Yom Tov. We don't allow you to toivel on Yom Tov. Zera shema yisha. We don't want to season people to leave these things over for Yom Tov, and that's why we don't let you toivel it on Yom Tov. So far we have three reasons, and now Rav is reason number 4. Rav Amar when you toivel a keli, it looks like you're fixing a keli. You're not allowed to fix a keli on Shabbos or Yom Tov, but it looks like you are when you toivel it, and therefore you're not allowed to toivel. Correct. Gemara, Adam Nami, a person who's tamei and toivels, he's being mesaken himself. So how is it that according to Beitzah, a person is allowed toivel on Shabbos and Yom Tov? So America's Adam near Kamaker, when he's going into the mikveh, it doesn't look. People aren't going to necessarily know that he's toiveling because he's tamei. He maybe was hot. He wanted to cool off. He wanted to get a refreshing swim. That's why he went in. That's good if it's a nice clean pool. Mayim royim. What if it's a filthy mikveh? No one's going to go in there to cool off. Michael and Mamer. How are you going to allow tefillah that there? It'll be obvious that he's toiveling. So how can he toivel in such a pool? Rab Nachman Yitzchak. It happens from time to time. A person was walking in the boiling heat, and he's sweating bullets, and he's so exhausted. And then he'll actually even allow himself to toivel in a dirty mikveh. You know why? Because he's just so hot, he needs relief. And therefore, people won't know necessarily that he's toiveling. They might think he's just cooling himself off. That makes perfect sense if it's a hot day. That's where there's a problem. That's where a person will assume that someone might be cooling off. But the Moshe Shama Michael Mamer, what in the winter? In the winter, no one's jumping into a pool to cool off. So how could a person toivel in a dirty mikveh on Shabbos or Yom Tov in the winter? There's no other reason why somebody would go into such a mikveh unless he had to cool himself off. Sometimes a guy comes back from work dirtier than the dirty mikveh. So filthy that for him, the mikveh is also a relief. And he'll wash even in the dirty mikveh. Sometimes a person will even go to a dirty mikveh. I remember when I was a bacher in Israel, there was a mikveh right near our dira, and I remember two things about the mikveh. I remember it was a very miraculous type of mikveh, because you can go into that mikveh completely bald, and you can come out with a complete head of hair. Nobody in that kehillah ever got a hair transplant, because people would go to the mikveh and they'd come out with a whole wig. It was beautiful. That was number one. Number two is they had to keep the mikveh at least at 110 degrees, because otherwise it would gel. And I remember Friday afternoon I would see the shamus throwing garlic cloves into the mikveh, and I asked him, like, "What are you doing?" Because he says, "I'm doing it to clean the water." So what do you mean? In the mikveh, that sometimes you see they throw in a chlorine puck to shock the mikveh. They put a chlorine puck that dissolves and cleans the mikveh. They put chlorine in. What are you putting garlic in for? He says, no, we're doing it because it's more of a natural. Chlorine is a chemical. We want to use a more of a natural, cleaner, natural purifier. But he was lying to me, because the next day on Shabbos, I saw that he chopped out pieces of the mikveh to serve as gala by the kiddush the next day, because it was gel. So that's what I realized, that the garlic wasn't just there to clean the water. It was just adding flavor to the gala. Zok the Helig Gemara.
Yes,
Yes.
who's coming back on Shabbos and Yom Tov from work to bathe themselves?
Well, maybe he wasn't working. I said he was working, so I shouldn't have said he was working. He was in the field for whatever reason. That's right. Thank you for correcting. He wasn't working. And someone who's working on Shabbos is not going to the mikveh.
Who has a shash that they're the stomachs, what you're saying, guys?
Yeah, a guy could have gotten dirty from whatever reason, and he wants to clean himself up. So thank you for bringing it up. That was a mistake. He couldn't have been working. Unless he had one of those kiosks that we learned about a couple of days ago that are allowed to be open on Yom Tov. So Zok the Gemara, Teindech b'Shabbos. So this all makes sense on Shabbos, where you can say that he can go to the mikveh. It's not looking like Masak and Mana, because people are thinking that he went in either to clean himself off or to cool himself off. But the Yom Kippur, on Yom Kippur, at this point, you're allowed to go to the mikveh on Yom Kippur. You're allowed to go be mitayr yourself in the mikveh on Yom Kippur. How could we allow that? It's near Masak and Mana. And nobody's going to think that he's going to cool off, because you're not allowed to cool off in water on Yom Kippur. And no one would think he's cleaning himself off, because you're not allowed to clean yourself on water on Yom Kippur. So how could you allow someone to go to the mikveh on Yom Kippur? And of course, we don't go to the mikveh on Yom Kippur anymore. And Tosus, at the end, we'll learn Tosus that explains why. But in those days, you were allowed to go to the mikveh on Yom Kippur. Amarava, very simple. Mi'ika midi, the b'Shabbos shari, we determined that on Shabbos you're allowed to go to the mikveh. Could you have something that on Shabbos would be mutter? And Shabbos is much more chomer than Yom Kippur. The Yisurim of Malachas on Shabbos are beskila. On Yom Kippur, it's karas. So Shabbos is much more severe. Shabbos is much more severe. So how could you say that something should be mutter on Shabbos over Yom Kippur also? Elahoyelu v'Shabbos shari b'Yom Kippur namer shari. Since they are allowing you to go to the mikveh on Shabbos, they'll also allow you to go to the mikveh Yom Kippur. So this is an innovative chiddush, that there's this concept that since on Shabbos we're allowing it, Yom Kippur will be sort of bottled to Shabbos, and even though Yom Kippur standing on its own, there might be a reason to aser, but we're just going to throw it in with Shabbos.
But Yom Kippur is there's an issue from the Chitza. The Chitza says
that's the Gemara's kasha. That's the Gemara's kasha. On Yom Kippur, there's an issue of Chitza, so how could you allow a guy to go to the mikveh?
But on Yom Kippur, the Kohen went 4 or 5 times to the mikveh.
Exactly, and in those days, even someone who was tamei would be able to, if someone was a bal keri, he'd be able to go to the mikveh to daven in Yom Kippur. And the Gemara is asking why don't you have this problem? Because people are going to know you're being Masak and Mana. That is exactly the Gemara's question. So, fact the Gemara, does Rava hold of this massively innovative svar that since Shabbos is mutter, so we'll throw Yom Kippur in for free? It's a huge chiddush, and we're going to show you that Rava does not hold of such a svar. Because what now we learn, what if you have a toothache? So using vinegar, gargling vinegar, sipping vinegar would soothe and heal it. So the halach is lo yigma behenes achayim. So you're not allowed to sip vinegar because it's refuah. What's the problem with refuah? So if we slide right over into Rashi, lo yigma behenes achayim, it's l'refuah. Why are you not allowed to do that? The whole refuah b'Shabbos, any act of refuah on Shabbos, gazer b'Rabbanan. There are abundance that it's usher to do, even though it's mutter midaraisa. There are abundance usher. We're afraid if we allow you to take medicine on Shabbos, you might actually make medicine on Shabbos. That's already a deraisa. That's an issue deraisa to grind on Shabbos. That is not allowed. So therefore, you're not even allowed to take this medicine. But what you are allowed to do is metabalu kedarkoi. You're allowed to dip things into vinegar while you're eating. In the course of eating, you use condiments, so you're allowed to dip in. And in this wrap, and if that vinegar that you're able to get into your mouth while you're eating in the process of your meal, that's allowed. How could you allow that? Lo yigma u'toilet. You're not allowed to sip and then spit it out, but you're allowed to sip and swallow. How could you allow that? How could you make that distinction? If you're not allowed to take it in your mouth, whether or not you're swallowing it as part of your meal or you're just spitting it out, it shouldn't be allowed. So therefore Abaye explains, Kitna Nami Masnisin, the Mishnah that says that you're not allowed to sip, that's Megameya Upayla. That's only if you're spitting it out. But if you're going to swallow it, you'd be allowed to. So let me go back. I don't think I explained properly the Gemara's Kasha. Sure, you're not allowed to sip if he's going to spit it out, but let him sip and swallow. It should be no different than the second case where we allow him to be metabel kedarkoi. So why can't you sip and swallow? It looks like you're eating. And that Abai said, in fact, that is the case. When the Mishnah says that you may not sip, it meant because you weren't swallowing. It means you're not allowed to sip if you're going to spit it out. But avada, if you're going to swallow, you are allowed to sip the vinegar. It's like sometimes I have canker sores in my mouth and I'm here in shul and it hurts. So I'll go and I'll take some vodka and I'll rinse my canker sore with the vodka. And I remember I once did it and then I spit out the vodka in the sink. I don't like drinking. And someone said, "How could you do that?" I said, "What do you mean?" He says, it's vodka. I spit it out. A choshev that is, you have to swallow it. So ever since then, I became an alcoholic because every time I have a canker sore, I can't spit it out because this guy might catch me spitting out the vodka. So Dr. Gemara, all that the Mishnah is answering is to sip vinegar and spit it out. But if you're going to swallow, you're allowed to even drink vinegar on Shabbos and Yom Tov if you have a toothache. Rava had a different teretz. He said, even if you want to argue that to drink that vinegar, even if you're going to swallow it, there's a reason to say that it would be us. The problem is, why should it be usher? Why should it be usher? It's kederach achila. V'lo kasha. Kan koydem tibel, kan la'achar tibel. If you have not eaten yet, so then it's normal you're going to ingest vinegar before your meal. Rashi says, koydem achila, megameo b'ilay. It's normal to do. Someone saying you do that won't know that you're doing it for refuah. The savri chaymitz ahani le'lameichel. By drinking some vinegar before the meal, it induces his appetite. It makes it easier for him to eat. So when the Beitzah says that you're not allowed to ingest, that means if you ate already, if you had your meal already, then there's no justification to drink this vinegar. It must be strictly for refuah. So v'lakasha kan kodim tibel, kan lachat tibel. So Rabbi is making a distinction. He's saying you're allowed to drink the vinegar before your meal, not after the meal. Well, based on Rabbi's svara, that since you are allowing it on Shabbos, you should allow it on Yom Kippur as well. Well, why don't you do the same thing here? The Misa name a hoil the kodim tibel shari, lachat tibel nami shari. Why did you say since we're allowing you to drink this vinegar before you ate, you should also be able to drink it after you eat? But you don't say that hoil. So if you don't say that hoil here, why do you say the hoil to allow someone to toivel on Kippur? Zakta Gemara, Hadebe Rava Meahi. Rava was chayzer from one of these two halachas, and Rashi says which one was he chayv from? The chaymitz, the Shanya Kabaya. So Rava, in fact, agrees that you're always allowed to swallow the vinegar. What you're not allowed to do is spit it out. So therefore, Rava actually does not say. Rava says you could say hoil. You could say hoil, and if we would have made a distinction between before and after, it would be a problem. Because once you're allowing vinegar before the meal, we would allow it after the meal as well. And in fact, Rava doesn't make that distinction. Rava holds just like Abaye, and you're never allowed to drink vinegar if you're going to spit it out, and you're always allowed to drink vinegar if you're going to swallow it. How do you know he was chayzer from this? Maybe he was chayzer from his explanation of our Mishnah. He explained our Mishnah that the problem with toiveling that it's near Kamisakin, and on Yom Kippur he's allowing because of oil. Maybe he's chayzer from that, and maybe he's going to agree with one of the previous svaras, and he's chayzer from that svar. Zok the Gemara loisal kadai. We don't think that he was chayzer from that because we have a Beitzah to support that. The Tanya called chayvit tfilos toiveling kedarkin bein b'Tisha B'av bein b'Yom Kippurim. There's a Beitzah that you're allowed to toivel Yom Kippur. So Rava must still maintain that you're allowed to toivel on Yom Kippur and you're not allowed to toivel on Shabbos. So he clearly hold. I'm sorry, you're allowed to toivel on Shabbos and you're allowed to toivel on Yom Kippur. So he must clearly hold it at hoil. And since he must clearly hold it at hoil, we're going to have to say that by the case of the vinegar, he agrees with Abaye that if you're going to swallow the vinegar, you're always allowed to eat it. And if you're not going to swallow the vinegar, you're never allowed to eat. Therefore, that's not a case that's related to Hayy. So now we've finished the sugya of all the multiple reasons why you're not allowed to tovel on, why you're not allowed to tovel kalim on Shabbos. It's either because you might carry them, or it's because you might leave them. You might bedafka leave them. And the second svara was, I said Rabbi svara. There was a Yosy svara. Let me just review it. We just learned it. I should remember it right off the bat.
Squeezing.
I'm sorry.
Squeezing.
Squeezing. So it's either because I might carry, or because I might squeeze. Rav Bibi says I might leave it, and then you have the final svara of Rava is because it's nira kemisakin kli, and by a person it's not nira kemisakin kli because a person, people are going to say that he's just trying to cool off or clean himself. I am Kippur. You don't have that. No. So Yom Kippur we just throw in together with Shabbos. So now the question is, nowadays nobody tovels on Yom Kippur. Nobody tovels on Tisha B'Av. Yet we finished off with a Beitzah that says everybody agrees you could tovel on Yom Kippur. Everybody agrees you could tovel on Tisha B'Av. So how do we understand what we do nowadays? So let's think a second. A typical woman who has to go to the mikveh, she keeps Shiva Nekiyim. But we know Midaraisa, a Nida doesn't need Shiva Nekiyim. Midaraisa, a woman can see Nida for 7 days, and then as long as at the end of the 7 days she stops seeing, she can go to the mikveh that night. Why are we makbel and Shiva Nekiyim? Because we treat every woman who sees any dam anytime like a suffix ziva, and therefore we require the 5 days and the 7 Nekiyim. But that's not really Nikar Din. So therefore, Zok Tosfos, the reason why in those days they were allowed to tovel on Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av, Hayadafka lahani shetovelin filas mitzvah bismana. That's only if you're toveling at the designated night, which is the first possible night that you can tovel. If you're toveling bismana, that might be doicha Yom Kippur, that might be doicha Tisha B'Av. But nowadays, where we have chumrah upon chumrah upon chumrah, that's in the Gemara, shekol tvilos shenishaseinu tovelos hanu tvilah shaloi bismana. Our women are never toveling at the first possible that they're able to midaraisa. The inside for Zayin Nekim is suffix shein zavos. All of our Zayin Nekim is based on sveikis and chumras that the Gemara was masakin. Therefore, einan tovelos b'Tisha B'Av u'Yom Kippur. They're not allowed to tovel on Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur because it's not a tefillah b'zmana. That's one svara. Tosfos has some issues with this svara, and he says another svara which is much more palatable to us. And now I'm at the fourth line into the wide lines of Tosfos.
Yosy,
yes.
Yosy, as Isha, you're allowed to, there's a lot of go because Bismana. But Yom Kippur, she's also even, even from the Issa of Yom Kippur.
Beautiful. She's also to her husband anyway.
Yeah, so
that's a beautiful story. So that's what the Reed says. You're Mechav, that's exactly what the Reed said. Clearly, this is not your first time around because you're saying this far of Tosfos. Beautiful. I'm sorry.
I don't remember.
Beitzah Choshedu. The Bisman Hazeh ain't toivlin loy b'yom kippurim v'loy b'Tisha B'Av. Why? The Dafka Haim, they were able to toivel on those days. Show you oiskim at the Hiris. They had more than one reason to toivel. One important reason was they were dealing with Hiris and they had to make sure not to be metam anything. So therefore, hayatzarech litbel miyad, at the very earliest possibility that they could be metam themselves, they had to. Kedei shelo yitamu at Hiris. So they shouldn't touch something by mistake, kachim, truma, and be metam it. But nowadays, we're not eating kachim, we're not eating truma, we don't have any of that. So the only reason why the woman is toiveling is to allow her to be with her husband. Well, if that's the case, then there's no reason for him to toivel on Yom Kippur. If she has to go to the mikveh, she can do all the preparation before Yom Kippur. And then there's minor preparation required Mochi Yom Kippur before she goes to the mikveh. Because you do have to do some preparation right before the tefillah. but you can't toivel on Yom Kippur or Tisha B'Av. Even if she was able to toivel then, Asura Labaila, she can't be with her husband anyway. But then Yom Kippur, Tashmish Hamita is Asur, and as well on Tisha B'Av. So therefore, there's no reason for a woman to toivel today on Yom Kippur anymore. In those days, it was relevant for Tahiris, but today it's not relevant. And that's why women do not toivel on Yom Kippur, nor.
That's why I say Baruch Shekivanti.
That's right. That's exactly what you said. Beautiful. Beautiful. The Rosh Hashanah should always be mechavan to Tosfos. Okay.
Was the Gemara always talking about women? I thought it was talking about men.
Men as well, because if once it's relevant to Tahiris, it's just as important for men to toivel as it is for women. Okay, so let's see the Heilige Gemara weiter. No, actually, we're going to stop here. This is a little bit of a complicated Gemara, so we'll make sure to save this for tomorrow. So tomorrow we're learning for the first time at 7 a.m. and the second, instead of learning at 9 or 9:15, we're going to learn at 8:45 sharp, because there's a Levaya at 9:30, and we want to go to the Levaya. So we'll learn 8:45 sharp to 9:30. That's when we'll do the second share. And
you get the share in the Agora?
In the Agora, yeah, it's in the basement in the Agora. It's in the Oitzer.
Who's Levaya? Who's Levaya?
Who's Levaya? Weisbaum. Moshe Weisbaum, all of us home.
So
Rabbi Levi's son-in-law.
Wow.
So here, Basuras Tovis. And then Mitchum at 8:30 tomorrow night, I'm going to be learning with Rabbi Finkel's group, and they're going to want to go back to Daf Yud Aleph, so we'll be learning Daf Yud Aleph tomorrow night at about 8:30. We should hear Basuras. And the Rebbeinu should be Menachem the family. Okay, I get to vach everybody. Thank you very much.